Welcome back to our study of the book of Genesis for the spring semester of 2026. This lesson will begin with in chapter 10 and 11 on the Tower of Babel, the confusion of all things. This is after the flood. We'll look at some numbers here in a little bit about what the population may have been at this time. A lot more than what you might think it would be. The population at Tower of Babel, by doing mathematical formulas, projections, and I'm not a mathematician, but I have found these formulas online, and some of this my calculations as to when creation was. I believe creation was around the year 4013 BC. That's based upon my own calculations, so I'm not saying they're 100% accurate. I believe they're close, as close as we can get, because the Bible doesn't give us an exact date or anything like that. But by doing the population, not population, but the ages of each of the patriarchs or other people in the Bible, when the temple was built, is a good place actually to start and go backwards from, because the Bible does tell us when the Exodus began, and so that helps us to get a close, approximate view as to when creation took place. Now, we do know, according to the scriptures, that Noah was 950 years old when he died, who lived 950 years. The flood occurred when Noah was 600 years old. We know that. I believe the flood took place around 2457 BC, which would mean that 1656 years after creation. Then the Tower of Babel took place when Noah was 940 years old. We know it took place 10 years before Noah died, which would make it 1996 years after creation. So approximately 2,000 years after the world was created, we have now the Tower of Babel. 339 years after Noah and his family left the ark, the tower was built. So an average growth rate for 339 years. So we can calculate an approximate population of the earth for those 339 years. And it's pretty amazing how quickly the population can grow. I was born in 1958. The population was a little over 3 billion people. World population about 3.5 billion people at that time. It's now 2026, so 67 years later, the population of the earth is 7.5, close to 8 billion people. So we're talking more than doubled in 67 years. They say the population of the earth was 2 billion in the year 1900. So it took 58 years from 2 billion to reach 3.5 billion. But it only took 67 years from 3.5 billion to 7.5 billion, whatever it exact is. So we can see that population would grow significantly. On that same idea, if you went backwards in time from 7.5 billion, in 1958 you get 3.5 billion, 1900 you get 2 billion. They say at the time of Jesus it was about 200 million. You go back in time, how many years before population is 2? You know, it doesn't take that long, which would prove that evolution cannot be correct. According to evolution, man's been here millions of years. If that were so, the population of the earth would be trillions and trillions, a number that was it Google? I think Google's the number. the largest number that ever was. Population would be far beyond that. But nevertheless, let's look at the math here. Average growth rate for 339 years. If you looked at small countries, the growth rate would rise as high as 5%. If you looked at larger countries, the growth rate would be 1.4%. If we take just a guess, a conservative estimate of population growth rate 3.5%, it would take, after the flood, of course there was 8 people on the ark, so after the flood, the formula calculated growth based on initial population, which is P, the growth rate, which is R, and the number of years, which is Y. That formula is 1 plus R, Y times P. Plugging in the values of 1 plus 0.35 or 3.5%. For the years, 339 multiplied by 8, the number of people that were, the population at the time of the Tower of Babel would be approximately 928,685 people. So almost 1 million people in 339 years. And that makes perfect sense after the Tower of Babel, because that's 2,000 years to the time of Christ. So going from 1 million to 200 million, that sounds right. Especially when you look at mankind, the way what all took place during the times, wars and everything else that would eventually kill off quite a few as well. So these numbers sound mathematically, scientifically correct. So again, the population of Tower of Babel was almost 1 million people, 928,685 if you do the math by following a formula. There we go. With that being said, when they got to Tower of Babel here, we have the problem. God told them to disperse, to separate, and spread out throughout the world because He didn't want them staying in one place. He didn't want them all around at the same place because, well, it says, and the whole earth was as one language and one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, Genesis 11, 1, 2a. And then we see a man by the name of Nimrod. I don't have the name on here. I don't know why I left it off, but it says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That word mighty hunter has an indication of people, that he may have been a murderer, and that the mighty hunter before the Lord sounds like a good thing, but basically it's a bad thing. And so they found a place in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. According to the scripture, Shinar is an ancient name for Babylon, located on the banks of the Euphrates River. We see that in the book of Daniel. And then God said, separate, they said, let's build a tower, because we don't be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Well, and they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name. Now, you see the indication here. It says, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name. It's all about people, not about God. Tower of Babel was a place of idolatry, of astrology. It wasn't a place to worship God. When it says, whose top may reach into heaven, they weren't trying to get to God. They were trying to get to the stars. And they would worship the stars. And they said, let us go to build us a city tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. So, again, they're not trying to worship God by any means. They were enamored by the stars. Evidence suggests Tower of Babel was used for astrology. Later, towers, ziggurats, is the name for this type of building that we believe that it was. And we don't know exactly. We speculate that's what it was because in this land, that's what became a traditional building for places of idolatry. And so ziggurats today, or even back centuries ago, maybe not at the Tower of Babel, because we don't know how many planets they knew of at that point. We just don't have indication. It may have been, the buildings may look different than they do today, or they may have looked the same, and what's today has been copied from them. We just don't know the exact details of the building, and it's not important that we do know them. But we do know later on that the ziggurats were constructed in 7 stages because they knew of 7 planets. They had black for Saturn, orange for Jupiter, red for Mars. So they would color code these ziggurats. On the summit were the signs of the zodiac. So if I were standing on the top of a tower of a ziggurat, looking down at the top of the ziggurat, I could see stones embedded into the top, formed in the different zodiacal signs. Star worship, disobedience, lest we be scattered. Now, today people put a lot of effort into astrology and believe that it guides their lives. It just amazes me how these people who will follow their horoscope, what somebody writes. And if you read those horoscopes, they're so generic they can apply to anything and everything. And they become self-fulfilling prophecies. So, meaning that if you're single and you want to find a mate, and you read your horoscope that today at Walmart you'll find the love of your life, then what you'll do is you'll go to Walmart and you'll keep looking around until you find somebody you like, and you'll introduce yourself to them. And if they talk back to you, you say, oh, my horoscope was right. You made it happen. And people put so much effort in that, saying, I was born under this sign, and that's why I'm like I am. And the reality of it is, there's not 12 zodiacal signs anyway. There's 13. And so whatever zodiacal sign you think that you are is probably not what you are. You probably could be the one after what yours is now or before what yours is now. Mine would have been the 13th one, and I can't remember what it's called. I'm supposedly Sagittarius right now, but the reality of it is I was born, and when the 13th one would be, I don't know what Sagittarius means. I don't know what the 13th one is even called, because it's worthless, but people put effort into it, and that's what happened at Tower of Babel. They put effort into this and belief into a star, that a star can guide their lives. That's what amazes me about commentaries sometimes. I remember several years ago, some Sunday school literature I read that said that the wise men, when Jesus was born from the east, were astrologers, and they gathered signs from the stars, and the stars told them to follow, and they would find the Messiah. Well, first of all, it's blasphemy to say that they relied upon astrology to get them where God's at. No, that's not what happened. What happened was that God gave them a sign. I personally believe, and I think very logically, that the wise men were very likely were Jews living in the Middle East, or living in the East, not Middle East, but living in the East, because they were left over from the Babylonian captivity, and they had the book of Daniel with them, because Daniel lived there, and they had the writings of Daniel, and they knew that Daniel's prophecy in chapter 9, 24 through 27, told them when the Messiah would die. And so they started looking, knew that the time was right. They would be 490 years after Nehemiah went back to build the walls and streets. Exactly 490 years later, or 483 years later, excuse me, that the Messiah would die. Now, they didn't know when he'd be born, but they knew when he would die. So as time got nearer, I believe they started asking God for a sign. And then finally God gave them a sign of a star to follow that wasn't a normal star in heaven. It was probably much lower, something that they could follow that would guide them from the east back to Jerusalem, where they finally would get there after Jesus, a couple of years after Jesus was born. And so they weren't star worshippers, they weren't astrologers, they were more than likely Bible-believing Jews who was concerned about the coming Messiah. So we see constructed 7 planets, different color-coded signs of the zodiac for star worship, and their whole main premise was disobedience. They were afraid of being scattered when God told them to scatter. Judgment would come. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Now, I believe this is the world we're living in today, that there's so much people here that there's nothing going to be restrained from what's going on today, which they have imagined to do. I believe that the population has grown so significantly, even in my own lifetime, that people have a lot more free time on their hands than they used to have. Before my time, and I mean, I grew up with an outhouse. We didn't have indoor plumbing. One of the houses I lived in when I was a kid. 50 years before that, very few people had indoor plumbing. They had to farm by hand. They had to work hard out in the fields or use animals, what have you. They didn't have time to fool around and just waste time. They had to work hard from sun up to sundown. And so they spent their time working hard and worshiping the Lord on Sunday. As technology advanced and more people now, it takes less people to get more done, then people have more time on their hands. The more time they have on their hands, and the more people there are, the further they get away from God. And I think that's the world we're living in today, is that people are so far away from God because they have too much time on their hands and sit around and imagine all types of evil. Worst thing that ever happened to the world, I believe, is a lot of technology with the internet. I think it's been one of the great sins that man has invented. Not that it can't be used for good, because yes, it can, but for the most part, we know it's not. And so people have gotten away from God. And now, nothing will restrain from them, which they've imagined to do. The result, so the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So now at the Tower of Babel, we have the confusion of languages, that they confound the language of all the earth. Now God made them separate. So here at the Tower of Babel, and I'm going to give you some languages here, and this is not the original languages of the people. We don't know what they were. I mean, it may have been Hebrew, may have been one of them. Sanskrit may have been one. We don't know. So these are just names and languages that I'm going to give you an example of, I believe, that what happened here. When the Tower of Babel, when the languages were confused, you had, like I said, nearly 1 million people. And I don't know how many languages they would change to, but if all of a sudden, where you spoke Hebrew, now all of a sudden you speak Sanskrit. And when you talk to people that you know and they don't understand you, then the only course of action you have is to find somebody who can understand you. And so we'll have mankind throughout the city here, Shinar, plains of Shinar. So here's mankind, all able to communicate with one another, and then God confounds the languages. And when he does that, we have now this group who before were just listen to mankind. Now they speak Hebrew. This one over here, this one over here, there speaks Hebrew. This one now speaks Greek, and this one now speaks Greek. This speaks Sanskrit, and this speaks Sanskrit. This speaks Chinese, this speaks Chinese. This speaks Japanese, this speaks Japanese. So now wherever you're at within the city, you speak Sanskrit, and the people around you, here's Chinese, here's Hebrew, and over here's Greek. You don't understand them. And so now you have to find someone that you can understand. So this is what would happen next. The Japanese would join together, the Sanskrit would join together, the Hebrew would join together, the Greek would join together, and the Chinese would join together. Now these separate into their own groups and then eventually to their own lands. Now we know when the languages started. What we don't know is when the races started. Right? We don't have a clue. And so we know that there's different races, so obviously they had to start somewhere. And we know eventually the races will go away if the world lasts long enough. Because of intermarriage along the line, eventually we're all going to go back to one race, whatever it might be. It may take several hundred years to get there. Who knows? We're heading that way already, but there's a lot of interracial relationships today. So it may take 300 or 400 years. It may I don't know. I'm just speculating here. I think it's possible that the races began here at the Tower of Babel. Now, they could have started immediately. All right? The Asian group here, they started looking the same, whereas the day before they all, whatever they looked like, we don't know what color they were before Tower of Babel. Whatever race they were before the Tower of Babel, let's just assume everybody looked like a Hebrew. I don't know. As soon as the languages changed, God may have changed the color of skin so that they could recognize one another. They look down and say, okay, I look like an Asian, over there's an Asian, and I'll separate under them. I don't know. It also could be that they didn't start immediately, but as the next generation comes along, they may have started. Because these two Hebrews who joined together may have the same similarities in DNA, and their children would then have that DNA. The Greek would have that DNA, the Japanese would have that DNA, the Chinese would have that DNA, Sanskrit would have that DNA, whatever. And then their children became different races. Now again, I'm speculating here. Obviously we know that it happened, that different races came into being. But what we definitely know for sure is that the language has changed. Now, I think it's important of two things. that we know when the languages took place, and I think it's important that we don't know when the races took place. Because God wanted us to know about the languages, so that's important. He didn't tell us about the races. That means what? That's not important. Doesn't matter what color of skin. Doesn't matter where you came from. Those things are insignificant. They have nothing to do with anything. It's just that we are different people. And it's not that, I was taught in school that black people are black because they came from Africa and the sun's hot in Africa, and therefore because of the sun that they all became black. Well, first of all, it's stupid. Second of all, what about Brazil? They're on the equator. What about other nations? That's just absolutely ridiculous. That would mean that when I got married, me and my wife went to a tanning bed for several years and then had a child, that child would be born with a tan. Make sense? No. But that's what evolutionists try to teach us, and it shows just how stupid comments that they make, and what's even stupider is that people believe them. But again, we know the language has changed, and then whatever group you were with, you separated unto, and then you became that group, that nation. I know we only have 2, 3, 5 languages here. There could have been hundreds of languages, we don't know. Descendants of Noah's 3 sons, and here's where the peoples eventually would come from: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Japheth was the youngest son. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. In the Bible, when you read names, a list of brothers or whatever, whoever's first is the oldest, Shem, then Ham, and then Japheth being the youngest. What we gather is that the descendants of Japheth would end up becoming Gomer, which is Germany, it's believed to be, Magog, Tubal, and Meshech, Javan, which is Greece, Madai, which is Persia, Tyrus, Italy, Togarmah, which is Turkey, Armenia, Tarshish, which is Spain, and Kedar, which is Cyprus. So this descendants of Japheth have the same similarities in appearance. The Germans, or whether you're Italian or Persian or Greece, Spanish, what have you, just have the same overall look. Sons of Ham, the second born son, he had 4 sons: Cush, which is Ethiopia; Egypt, which came from Mizraim; Put, which is other African nations; and then Canaan, which is the Canaanites. And so, to continue on here, Genesis 10, 19, 13, 12 to 13, talking about the Canaanites. Then Nimrod, which becomes Babylon, and Assyria, which is Genesis 10, 8 through 10, we talked about that a while ago. Sidon, which is Phoenicia; Heth, the Hittites; Jebus is the Jebusites. Jebusites was Jerusalem. Before it was Jerusalem, it's called Jebus. When Joshua and children of Israel went into the Promised Land, they would fight against the Jebusites and take the land of Jerusalem. Philistia, which is the Philistines, and Sin. This is not, we hear the word sin, we think of bad things. It simply was a place. And many Asians is believed to came from this group as well. And so these are descendants of Ham. So you have 1, 2, 3 of his descendants would be the black races. Canaan is not a black race. His would be similar to the Jebusites. They would look just like the Jebusites. And we know that, of course, in Joshua chapter 9 verifies that. Sons of Shem, the firstborn, this would be where we use the term today here a lot of times, anti-Semitic. Semitic comes from the word Shem. I know it's got an H in it for us, but Shem or Sem. So a Semite is a Jew. Anti-Semitic is anti-Jew. So sons of Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the nation of Israel, Abraham, Ishmael, Middle East, Arab countries as well. So when you talk about anti-Semitic, people talk about anti-Jew, but in reality the word anti-Semitic could be anti-Arab as well, because they're descendants from Shem as well. But we do use it simply for the Jews today. Patriarchs, four main patriarchs of the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, very significant key figures in the study of the Old Testament. And we'll look more at those next time, 12 through 15.